Hey everybody, what's up? Mr. Dissonance, very happy to be back with the second part of the Being a Professional Poker Player series. And first thing we'll look at is software. What software is out there and what software would you need to have as a professional player? So the first piece of software we'll have a look at is Poker Tracker. I used to use Poker Tracker 3 and recently moved to Poker Tracker 4. It's a pretty amazing piece of software. I haven't used Hold'em Manager, but I think Hold'em Manager 2 and Poker Tracker 4 are fairly similar. The only reason I would choose Poker Tracker over Hold'em Manager is that they create software for Mac computers, which a lot of poker players use, and although PT4 isn't out on the Mac yet, it will be at some stage, and PT3 already has a native Mac client. And the other thing is that Mercenary, I think, did a brilliant video showing you how to analyze your database for heads up using PT3, and therefore you can follow that video step by step with PT3 or PT4, and you can get some very, very revealing and interesting stat analysis done. So that's why I'd choose either PT3 or PT4 over Hold'em Manager. And what does it do? Well, it can show you whether you're running bad or not. And as you can see here, I've lost $600, should have lost $500. Basically, I'm a massive fish, and I can't blame run bad on my losing 5 or 6 buy-ins there. You can also analyze your statistics other ways, looking at the individual tournaments or hands and that sort of thing. And you can get into some really advanced analysis. And as a professional player, this is a very, very good way to find leaks. You can also be running a HUD, a heads-up display, which tracks your opponent's statistics. And Coffee Yay released an absolutely brilliant HUD. If you're into HUDs with very detailed analysis, his is the Stone Cold Nuts, so I recommend that you check that out. But that's what PT3, PT4, or Hold'em Manager 1 or 2 can do for you. And there are maybe a very few professional players who don't use this software. My guess is it would be less than 1%. It's just an incredibly useful tool, and as a professional, I really think you should look into having it. And even as an amateur hoping to be a professional, you should definitely get into Hold'em Manager 2, PT3, or PT4. Let's move on and look at other software, some of which is available on the internet. And the first one we'll have a look at is SharkScope. This is software for checking the results of players, and it has a massive database. And a lot of players aren't opted in, which means that you can't access the results, but there is a large database of people who are opted in, and you just simply put their screen name in here and up come their results, and you can see if they're a winning player or not. And this will help you avoid regs. For example, this gentleman here, Jig for Me, has some pretty damn impressive stats. You wouldn't want to go play him if you're trying to make money. And that's what you can do with SharkScope. One word of warning is that you shouldn't use it while you're playing. You're only allowed to use it, I believe, before or after sessions. And I'm not sure how rigorously Stars polices that, but I wouldn't go quoting statistics to people in matches. That will get you in trouble. So that's a word of warning that you should definitely pay attention to. Alright, the next site here, pokeroptimizer.com. Let's make that a little bigger for the screen here. So this is a site which does the same thing that SharkScope does. You get free searches, 5 per day, just as you get on SharkScope. So for example, if you run out of your free searches on SharkScope and you didn't want to buy a subscription, you could come over here. It only services PokerStars, I believe. Let's check if that's right. Yeah. The advantage of this site is that it's not operating on an opt-in system, so you can find people that are not listed on Sharkscope here. A lot of people don't know about this site, and therefore they don't go and block themselves, which means their stats are going to be here. So if you want to know the stats on some and they're not listed on Sharkscope, you can come here, and generally they'll be here unless they've blocked. All right, moving along, ICMizer. This is a fantastic piece of software. As you can see, a little husng.com link on here. What this does is it helps you calculate odds, and you can use it, for example, let's say you can put in different scenarios. Somebody's min raising 47%. What's the optimum 3-bet jamming range against their opening range? You can do those sort of calculations, and I made up a whole bunch of charts for my students in my Heads Up Hyper course. I think there's about 34 of them, and although we don't use them too extensively, just having that information available is pretty cool. And I'll give you a quick example. I'll show you this is a couple of the charts from my course, how to deal with an 80% raiser at 16 big blinds and a 50% raiser at 16 big blinds, and of course we go into a lot of other detail. I'm not going to give all of the course information away, but you get the idea. They came from ICMizer, so you could make those own charts yourself. All right, Poker Pro Tools. This is for calculating equity. For example, if I have Jack 7 and he has Queen 6 and it all goes in pre-flop, how big a dog am I? And you can use that to calculate whether you've made good or bad plays. And also they have a downloadable thing. Mostly this tends to be used for Omaha, where the calculations are a lot trickier. You can do it pre-flop and post-flop, but it could be useful in Hold'em as well. All right, next, Card Runners EV. I don't think I put this on the list, but this is a brilliant piece of software which I've used. You can do some very, very complex calculations on this software with people's ranges. It's a little bit tricky to get the hang of. It's got a little bit of a learning curve to it, but you can do street by street analysis of your opponent's range, and you can check what the best action is and really do some very, very complex analysis with this. So it's not cheap. I think I forget the exact price, but I think there's also a free trial, so give it a go. This is some particularly brilliant software. All right, and related to that is Flopzilla, which I actually do have. I have paid for this software. I think it costs about $35. And what you can do with this is you can put in your opponent's range. So let's say we put in a 47% range, which is his calling range. So obviously this range wouldn't be appropriate for Heads Up Hypers, because we'd take a lot of these hands out of his calling range, but just as a sort of hypothetical. And then when we put in the flop, how much of his range hits that flop and how strongly. So for example, it says here he'll have no made hand 40% of the time. He'll have a weak pair 21% of the time, which clearly means we should be betting, because he'll have to fold 61% of the time. And then you see the rest of the holdings it'll have. And for example, you can put in the flop and then the turn and then the river, and you can find out exactly which flops hit your opponents according to their calling range and how strongly, and therefore you can find out how aggressively you should be betting, which cards are good barrel cards, if they check raise you, how likely they are to have air, all of that sort of stuff. It's a really, really useful tool if you're a pro. And let me check my little list here. Yep, gone through it all. The only other one is Sharkystrator. Sharkystrator I've covered before in a video. It's lobby registration software. Pretty much from the 60s or above. If you don't have it, you're not getting a lobby. And that may or may not be a good thing. I'm not going to comment on the ethics or anything else of the program. All I know is it's incredibly effective, and it does take a lot of the stress out of playing poker. So you can have a look at that video if you want more details on that. All right, let's move on. Alright, so I just checked and I think we're actually almost out of time, which is unfortunate. So there'll be one more episode in this series. And before I go, I want to talk about one last important thing, which is the importance of having a backup connection. And no matter where you live, no matter how good your internet is, it will go out at some stage. And if you're playing poker, that can be incredibly frustrating as someone sits there and steals your blinds. And unfortunately, the poker world is a bit dog eat dog, and people are not going to wait for you to come back generally. If you're a professional and you're playing another reg, it is considered good etiquette to wait for him or to ship his buy-in back. That's always appreciated and buys you goodwill in the heads up community. It's a small community, and if you violate that principle of not looking after the other regs, then the other regs will certainly not look after you. And you get by in this heads up community as a pro. A lot of it's to do with having goodwill from your other players. You don't want every other reg sitting you, so it's worth keeping everybody happy and doing the right thing there. So yeah, back on the backup connection, you can get an internet, what they call a dongle, which is like a USB device, and is pretty cheap to run and buy, and it won't give you great internet, but it will give you enough so that you don't lose your connection. So you should at least have one of those as a backup. I personally have an ADSL connection and also a backup satellite, and between them I very rarely lose any buy-ins. So have a backup. I've seen people playing 1Ks, 2Ks, even the highest levels, the 5Ks, without a backup connection and being disconnected and potentially losing lots and lots of money. So compared to how much you could lose if you just lose a buy-in or two, every month, having a backup and the peace of mind that will bring is just a fantastic investment. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and until the next one, run good.